Kinshade Stories family, I'm glad you're here, because what I'm about to share hasn't left me since it walked through my door. She came in on a Tuesday afternoon, and she wasn't crying. That's what I remember first. She was completely still, hands flat on her knees, eyes dry. She told me her name was Renata and that she needed to talk to someone before she did something she couldn't take back. I asked her what she meant by that. She said she had just gotten off a phone call with a detective in Phoenix, Arizona, and that the man she had believed was her brother-in-law for 11 years, the man who had kissed her sister on the cheek at every Thanksgiving, who had held her nephew the day he was born, who had stood in their parents' living room and sworn he loved her sister more than his own life, that man did not exist. His name wasn't Derek. His social security number belonged to someone who had died in 1987. And at the moment Renata was sitting in my office, that man was in a wedding venue in Phoenix, about to marry a woman who had no idea who he really was. Renata had called the police, and now she was sitting across from me, completely still, wondering how 11 years of her family's life had just become a crime scene. Before I go further, I want to say something important. Every story I share on this channel is real, but no two families are the same. What happened to Renata's family cannot be applied as a template to every situation involving trust or deception. Human relationships are far too complex for that. If anything in this story brings up feelings or situations in your own life, I strongly encourage you to speak with a licensed therapist or counselor. That's what we're here for. Renata was 43 years old and lived in Columbus, Ohio. She worked as a hospital administrator. Organized, detail-oriented, the kind of person who noticed when something was slightly off. She was married with 2 kids of her own. Her sister, Claudia, was 3 years younger and had always been what Renata described as the soft one, trusting, warm, the kind of person who believed the best about everyone until she had no choice but to stop. Renata told me the story from the beginning, or at least from where she believed the beginning was. Claudia had met Derek at a work conference in Cincinnati about 12 years before that Tuesday afternoon. Claudia worked in marketing. Derek said he was in commercial real estate. He was charming, good-looking in an easy, unforced kind of way. He remembered details: Claudia's favorite coffee order after one date, her mother's name after a phone call, the name of Renata's daughter after hearing it mentioned once. Renata told me she had liked him immediately. Most people did. They dated for about a year. Then Derek proposed. The engagement was beautiful. Their parents were thrilled. He fit into the family the way a person only does when they've put real effort into it. He showed up. He helped with yard work at her parents' house. He brought food to family dinners. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. Renata said she remembered thinking at one point during that year that Claudia had somehow gotten lucky in a way that didn't seem fair, not in a jealous way, just in the way you sometimes look at someone's life and think, they got this one right. The wedding planning started about 8 months after the proposal. Claudia and Derek decided they wanted something small but meaningful, around 60 guests, a venue outside Columbus, nothing extravagant. Their parents offered to help with costs. Derek said he wanted to contribute. He said he had money set aside, savings he had been building for years. He told Claudia's father directly, in the family kitchen over coffee, that he wanted to handle the venue and catering himself. He said it was important to him. He said it was how he was raised. A man provides. Claudia's father was moved. He told Renata later that he had felt in that moment that his younger daughter was going to be just fine. Derek collected the deposits. The venue required a payment of $14,000 upfront. The catering company needed $8,500. There were other costs: flowers, photography, a small band Claudia had loved at a friend's wedding. Derek handled all of it. He showed Claudia receipts, he showed her email confirmations. Everything looked real because he had made it look real. Renata told me she had seen some of those confirmations herself and had no reason to question them. 2 weeks before the wedding, Claudia called the venue to confirm the final head count when she learned that no deposit had ever been received. The venue had no record of her name, Derek's name, or any reservation. The catering company said the same thing. The email confirmations Derek had shown her were fabricated. His phone number for his real estate office was disconnected. His apartment, which he had never fully moved out of, always explaining that he was in transition, was empty. The landlord said he paid cash month to month and had cleared out quietly about 10 days earlier. He was gone. Claudia's family lost approximately $31,000. Not all of it from Derek's collections, some of it was money they had spent themselves on other elements of the wedding, now useless. Their parents had to dip into retirement savings. Claudia took out a personal loan to cover debts she hadn't known she was inheriting. The shame of it, that particular shame of having been deceived in front of everyone you know, settled into the family like something physical, like weather that doesn't lift. Renata told me her sister didn't leave the house for 3 weeks after. She told me her father didn't talk about it for years. She told me she herself had spent a long time angry at Claudia, and then angrier at herself for being angry at Claudia, and then eventually just angry at Derek, whoever Derek actually was. That was 4 years before Renata sat down in my office. She had mostly built a wall around it by then. It was a wound that had scarred over, not healed, scarred. There's a difference, and people who have lived through something like that usually know exactly what I mean. And then 7 weeks before that Tuesday, a woman named Sandra had found Renata on Facebook. Sandra lived in Phoenix. She was 38 years old and engaged to be married in 6 weeks to a man she had met at a work conference 2 years earlier, a man in commercial real estate. A man who was warm and charming and remembered every detail. A man who had offered, recently, to handle the venue and catering deposits himself. A man whose name, according to Sandra, was Marcus. Sandra had been doing what a lot of engaged women do in the weeks before their wedding, looking up her fiancé's social media, his background, his past. Not from suspicion, just from the excited, slightly anxious energy of someone about to make a permanent decision. She had found an old photo on a mutual friend's page, and in that photo, at what appeared to be a family dinner, there was a man she recognized, standing next to a woman who was not her, looking entirely at home. She sent Renata a message on a Tuesday morning. Renata had not responded for 3 days because she assumed it was spam. Then she opened it, and then she called the detective. When Renata finished telling me all of this, she sat back. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm not sad. I'm not even really angry anymore. I just feel like 11 years of my family's memory has been contaminated. Does that make sense?" I told her it made complete sense. She said, "My nephew asks about his dad sometimes. Claudia doesn't know what to say. And now I'm thinking, how do you tell a 7-year-old that his father was never a real person?" I didn't answer that immediately. Some questions don't need an immediate answer. They need space. She said, "And I keep thinking about Sandra. I keep thinking about this woman in Phoenix who's about to walk into the exact same thing we walked into. And I called the police, and they said they'd look into it, but I don't know if they'll get there in time. And I don't know what's going to happen. And I came here because I feel like I'm about to fall apart, and I don't understand why, because this isn't even happening to me directly. It's happening to a stranger." That was the sentence that told me everything I needed to know about Renata. We spent a lot of that session just beginning to untangle what she was actually carrying, because what she described as not understanding why she was falling apart was actually a very clear psychological response. I explained to her that what she was experiencing had a lot in common with re-traumatization, when a new event pulls the nervous system back into a previous trauma before the previous trauma has been fully processed. Renata had never fully grieved what had happened to her family 4 years earlier. She had managed it, built the wall, functioned. But grief that isn't processed doesn't disappear. It waits. Together, we looked at the layers of what she was holding. There was the original loss, the money, yes, but more than that, the violation of trust. Table their hearts to someone who was running a calculated con. That kind of betrayal doesn't just hurt the person directly deceived, it radiates outward. It makes everyone who trusted that person feel foolish, even when there was nothing foolish about trusting someone who worked very hard to be trusted. We talked about what psychologists call a betrayal trauma response. When the person who hurts you is someone you had every reason to rely on, the brain processes it differently than it processes a random violation. It creates a specific kind of wound around the question of judgment. People who experience this often spend years quietly asking themselves, what did I miss? Why didn't I see it? Am I the kind of person who can be fooled? And that question, left unanswered, can quietly erode a person's confidence in their own perception of reality. I reminded her that people who deceive at the level this man did, constructing false identities, fabricating documents, sustaining a performance over years, are not caught by ordinary vigilance. They are skilled. They study people. They know what warmth looks like, what trustworthiness sounds like. Falling for that is not a failure of intelligence. It is a failure of the person doing the deceiving, not the people being deceived. I also wanted to address the guilt she felt about Sandra. I explained to her that her impulse to protect a stranger, someone she had never met and would likely never meet, was not irrational. It was an expression of something healthy, the part of her that wanted the ending to be different this time. She couldn't go back and save her sister, but maybe, in some way her brain was processing, she could save Sandra. I told her that she had done the right thing by calling the detective. That was not nothing. That was in fact a significant act of courage that came directly from having survived something terrible. We talked about what processing this would actually look like for her. Claudia, she said, had been in therapy on and off for years. Her parents had never spoken about it openly, which was its own kind of problem. I suggested that one of the most important things Renata could do, not just for herself but for her whole family, was to help bring the silence down. Families that survive this kind of betrayal often heal better when they're allowed to talk about what happened openly, without shame. The shame belongs to the person who did this, not to them. I asked her one question before the session ended. I asked, "When you think about your sister right now, what do you feel?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Proud of her, actually. She got up, she raised her son, she kept going. I don't think I've ever told her that." I said, "That might be the most important thing you do this week." She looked at me and nodded slowly, and then, for the first time since she had walked into my office, she let out a long breath, like she had been holding it for 4 years. I don't know what happened in Phoenix. Renata sent me a message a few days later saying that the police had made contact with Sandra and the wedding had been postponed. Whether that man, Derek, Marcus, whatever his real name was apprehended, I genuinely do not know. Cases like this move through the legal system slowly and quietly. What I do know is that Sandra did not walk into that wedding venue without knowing what she was walking toward, and that matters. Renata came back for several more sessions. We worked on what it means to rebuild trust, not in other people first, but in yourself, because that's always where it has to start. When someone has violated your perception of reality that completely, the work isn't about becoming more suspicious of others. It's about learning to trust your own instincts again, learning to believe that you can read a room. read a person. And that one sophisticated predator getting past your defenses doesn't mean your defenses are broken. It means you're human, and you trusted a good person who spent years learning how to be trusted. That's not a flaw. That's just what happens when a good person meets someone whose only real skill is deception. Here's what I want to leave you with today. There is a specific kind of grief that comes from losing something you didn't know you could lose. Not money, not a relationship, but a memory, a version of the past you believed was real. When that gets taken from you, it doesn't just hurt in the present, it reaches backward. It makes you question things you were sure of. It makes you feel, sometimes, like you can't stand on solid ground anymore. But here's what I've seen in 25 years of this work. People come back from that. Not unchanged, changed, yes, permanently, but back. Renata's sister got up every morning and made breakfast for her son. Her parents, in their quiet way, kept showing up, and Renata herself drove into my parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon, sat down in a chair, and started telling the truth out loud. That's not a small thing. That's exactly how healing begins. So I want to ask you something before you go. Have you ever had to rebuild trust in yourself after someone made you feel like your own judgment couldn't be believed? Not trust in another person, trust in you. Because I think that's something more people carry quietly than we ever talk about. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read them, and I mean that. If this story moved you or made you think of someone, please share it. And if you haven't subscribed to Kinshade Stories yet, do it now, because every week I bring you a story that I believe deserves to be heard. I'll see you in the next one.